Hello everyone, I'm Alex Antonio and I'm a physiotherapist. I've been a physio for around 14 years now, and I started off as a musculoskeletal, holistic therapist throughout, from head to toe, treating muscles, ligaments and joints. And then from that, I'd actually then went into what we call visceral therapy, which is where you gently mobilise the organs, so like your stomach, your liver, your bowels. And I found I had a lot of people coming through with things like endometriosis, which is like a women's health issue. And then I found myself then going a bit deeper into the pelvis a bit more, which then took me into sort of women's health work. So I actually specialise in visceral and women's health work, as well as treating people holistically. So I apply like a sports kind of therapy assessment to also someone who has like a women's health issue. So I like to think of the whole round picture, not just you've come in with like your hamstring problem. You might be a woman with a hamstring problem, but also you might have a few little issues with your bowels or constipation, or might have a bit of leaking. I got into physiotherapy through issues of my own. When I was 7, I used to play loads of sport, and I actually used to get like lower back pain, used to get knee pain, and as a child, you get taken to the doctors, and then they'd say, right, well, we need to X-ray your knees, And I was thinking, like, even as a 7-year-old, I was thinking, X-ray my knees, like, what are you going to find? And like, it's just like some bolts in there or something. So of course, they didn't really find anything, and they then sent me on to see physio, to NHS physio. And they did their work, and they looked and assessed, and but they didn't really help me. So my mum actually then at the time was seeing an osteopath for her neck. She had a bad car accident before I was born, and she couldn't really turn her head. And I used to go along as a child, and I used to be fascinated by what they were finding and what they were doing with her. And I was going, what are you doing? Why is that? And why is this? And in the end, my mum thought, hey, I'm going to take her to them. So she did, and within the first session they identified that I had something called hypermobility, which is where I can like bend my joints in like over the angles of what they should be. And as soon as that was like diagnosed and explained to me, that then my ligaments are a bit more lax than usual, and so my muscles work extra hard, then they can tighten up extra hard and then cause that kind of discomfort, especially if you're sporty. And so once I knew that, then I was so empowered, because then I knew how to look after myself. Not that I did much as a 7-year-old looking after myself, but at least knowing that, I then would be like, oh, okay, it's hurting because of this. It's not like, oh my God, my leg's gonna fall off, or, I'm gonna end up in a wheelchair or something, which is, crazy thoughts you do as a child, right? Children do think about silly things like that. Especially when you love doing sport and you think, oh my God, I'm not gonna have my legs again. So yeah, once that happened, and then whenever I had an issue, I just went back to them, and they would, loosen me up and things. And then I went to a careers advisor at school, and he said to me, oh, okay, right, here are your options, da, 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 da. And he said, well, have you thought about physio? And I said, well, I don't know, it didn't really help me so much as like osteopathy did, but I didn't really have the money at the time, or my parents didn't have the money at the time to, me to go to train for that. So he explained, well, why don't you do physio? And then you can train in other things on top of that. So that's what I did. So I did physio, and then now I have all these like tools to my tool belt. And I just want to thank that guy from the bottom of my heart, because he really opened up a whole world for me. I worked in a polyclinic where there were so many different other specialities and expertise under one roof. And I really, really enjoyed that. So much so that I worked there for around 10 years. And in the last maybe 3 years of that time, I then started to just rent a room on my own in Gravesend, where I live. And that became quite busy quite quickly. Then I decided I'm getting of an age where I would like to have a child. So I got pregnant, and in that last year, I then was proposed a sharing of a space with another colleague, and I thought, It might work out quite well because I could make it into 2 rooms. I could breastfeed in the other room whilst I treat one person, then my mum can help in the other room, and she was an absolute blessing, and that's exactly what did happen. And I thought that I would bumble along that way and maybe have another colleague working with me. Well, in 3 years, that has developed. We now have 2 sites and we have 3 rooms, and we have about 16 therapists now. And we've almost replicated that polyclinic where we have a reflexologist, we have 2 homeopaths, we have 2 sports therapists, 2 physios, 2 osteopaths. I could go on. We have a podiatrist, and I think it's brilliant that we can all work together under one hood, and we inspire and empower each other as well. And we share knowledge with each other to get the best result for people. I think it's fair to say that the majority of the British population would know that physio covers muscle injuries and back pain, calf pain, maybe neck pain, or if you've broken your bone or you've torn your ligaments, that kind of thing, right? What I think we don't realise is that we can actually treat a whole abundance of things, so much more than that. And these things can be treated in such a natural way that actually, by optimising your own body's system and your own body's functions, you can heal yourself a lot better. So when things are in the right place, your organs and your brain even releases certain chemicals like endorphins it's like your own body's morphine, yeah? And chemicals that will help balance things, and hormones will release in a better way. So we can treat things like acid reflux, we can treat things like diaphragmatic issues, we can treat things related to the bowels, to your pelvis, to dizziness. There are such a wide variety of things that we can help with that I think people are just not aware of. One of the areas I specialise in is women's health. And I'm going to give you an example of a young lady, aged 21, that reached out to me on Instagram, and she'd been having a lot of issues with what she felt was a prolapse, like a heaviness in her vagina after the birth of her son, and she was a year down the line. She came to see me, and she had seen 4 gynecologists before this, who had all assessed her and said, no, you don't have a prolapse. And she was like, yeah, but I still have this heaviness here, and I'm still, in a lot of discomfort, and it was making intercourse a problem. She wasn't opening her bowels properly. She was going like every 2 to 3 days. And when I assessed her, I noticed that she actually had a lot of abdominal discomfort, and she had a lot of abdominal bloating. Now that sort of constipation and that heaviness in her bowels, she'd actually had from years before, I then found out, because I go through the history. So I go through the history of when they're a lot younger, because that helps me build a picture to what's going on with that person. Anyway, I then assessed her, and when I assessed her within the internal region, there wasn't really a prolapse there, but there was pressure coming down from above. But not only that, when I asked her to activate her pelvic floor muscles, there wasn't even a flicker. So I went back and I thought, so what were these gynecologists doing? And she said they were basically putting the speculum up there, which is what they do, having a look and saying, nope, no prolapse. But what they weren't doing was assessing her muscles. So we don't just look at, what we can visibly see or just have a quick view of things. We do a proper in-depth assessment of everything building up like a timeline. Just gives us this great picture of the person holistically. Now that young girl, we did one session. And in one session, she came back and she felt 80% better. Can you imagine, after a year, 1 year of feeling this pressure, feeling so down and uncomfortable, not being able to connect with her partner, not feeling like a woman, like her body had failed her. And in one session, we were able to empower her to such a degree that she had a better quality of life again. And she kept being told by these gynecologists that it's okay, this is normal, and you will bounce back. And she was thinking, well, it's been a year now, and I'm quite young, why haven't I bounced back yet? And a lot of it was to do with her issues from before. So we treated those, not just what she came in with, but what was underneath, what those layers were that were affecting that symptom that was there. So we treat the person as a whole. We live in a stressful world, and there'll be some of us that ride on that stress and really use that stress to optimize how we function. But there will also be some of us that actually that stress becomes a real burden, and it can make us feel anxious or it can make us feel depressed. That feeling and those emotions that come from the brain and how we feel can affect our physical body. And then we can get to a point where those physical symptoms can build and build and build and build. And if they become too many layers, then that then can affect us again in how we feel and how our mood is. So we can help as therapists, as physios, as osteopaths, as sports therapists, by working on the body in certain points that can actually work with the brain to calm the system down. We've got two systems. We've got our fight and flight and our fright system, where we can be like, go, 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 go. And then we've got the rest and digest. And what we want is a lovely balance between the two. But there's a lot of us that are kind of up here, and we're walking around and we're like this, and that's okay, and we can function like that. But then there's the others where they're down here and it's not functioning properly, or they're just not balanced together. We want to bring them back so that they can go here a little bit or there a little bit. And majority of the time, people are up here. So coming to a session, and by simply even just touching a body, particularly on the tummy, will stimulate that rest and digest system to bring that balance, to bring that harmony back to the body, so that the brain can start to go, hey, you know what? I don't have to think about that tension in my diaphragm anymore. I don't have to think about the tension in my neck anymore that's causing me this kind of dizziness when I'm thinking. And it can think about actually rearranging the thought process and not being so anxious. So when we have things like anxiety, there's a link between our organs. For example, anxiety links really strongly with like the stomach and the diaphragm. And I often teach the song to people, should I stay or should I go? And that's kind of the link song with the stomach. And it links with its actual function. When you eat, that stomach decides, am I going to keep this food or am I going to puke it up? Yeah. And so that sort of anxiety is like, should I do it? I don't know if I should do it. I think I will, I think I won't. And you can see a real link with people that have that issue where their stomach can start to get elevated, because then the diaphragm becomes up here, because they become shallow breathers. And the more shallow breathers you are and you breathe up here, the more anxious you can be. And that doesn't mean you can walk around like a scared rabbit in headlights. You can be quite calm and look really calm on the outside, but your body's like screaming on the inside. And we can feel that as therapists. We can connect with your body and we can work with you to calm that system. And that in itself can help you go away feeling 20 times better. When you come for a session with us, we take your history, we listen to what you've been going through, what's been happening. That in itself is offloading that pressure, that information that's been weighing on you. We then take that information and we begin to educate you, and we explain why you may be feeling a certain way, why you may have those symptoms. And then we go into the physical. So when you come, we don't just come in, get you to take your clothes off, and then we start playing around with stuff. We actually get to understand you as a person and the symptoms that you've been going through. And by educating you on those things and what is familiar to us about what those symptoms can be related to, that then helps you to go away with such a better understanding of what could be happening to you. And that in itself will empower you.